Boom, what's up, familia? Dayspring here from the airport because I'm always traveling, especially during auction season. But I meant to record my thoughts on Jean Grey issue 3 a little earlier. And I was like, you know what? I get to the airport early enough. I'm like airport dad. I get in like 3 hours before my flight. I love sitting down. I love working on the podcast. I love recording my feels at an airport. So hopefully, I'm not going to be too loud for the people around me because it is pretty early. Um, but anyways, I wanted to discuss Jean Grey issue 3. Yay! And Familia, what a letdown. This issue was the biggest letdown ever. I'm going to say this up front. This is not going to be a positive review. I don't have positive things to say right now. I apologize in advance to those of you who are tuning in. You know, we love our God Queen Jean Grey. We love Louise Simonson. The series we are holding up to a higher bar. I'm just so sick and tired of being promised a Jean Grey series. Right, we were promised one during Judgment Day, that one shot of Judgment Day, Jean Grey, and it was going to answer all of our questions we had about Jean Grey and the Phoenix. Similarly with this one, this was supposed to be a meditation on Jean, on her guilt, and where did it all go wrong with Krakoa. And it's just not delivering. I don't know why it's more of the same. Not only is it more of the same, but they're tackling points in the story that have already been tackled, especially with Madelyne. We just had Dark Web. Less than a year ago, we had Jean and Madelyne in Dark Web where they resolved their issues. So I don't know why these issues are cracked open right now, why Jean would feel any sort of guilt, why there would be a line of Madelyne saying, "You took so much away from me." It doesn't make any sense to me. Jean gave Madelyne her memories of Baby Cable. That's what Madelyne wanted during Dark Web. Why is Madelyne still angry in this? And yes, there is this weirdness at the beginning of the issue where we see Jean talking to Madelyne, and it seems like Madelyne and Jean are, part of the same soul, which I do love that. I love that. Do not think I did not notice that little detail because I do love it. But then the story just morphs into a what if about Inferno. That's just not very interesting at all. And it just ends with Madelyne flooding Manhattan. How ironic. The Inferno is actually a flood. The world will not end in fire. It'll end in a tidal wave from Madelyne Pryor. That's it. What if Jean had heard the baby and was able to rescue the baby before, baby Nathan made it to Madelyne for the Inferno? And Madelyne incinerates Mr. Sinister and Cyclops. That's it. There is no meditation on the Jean Grey Madelyne Pryor relationship, especially since Zeb Wells and Dugan already tackled this during Dark Web. Okay, one positive thing I am going to say about this issue is the art. The Bernard Chang art is gorgeous. The way we open up to that page of Inferno, I think Inferno looks absolutely beautiful. Like I that's the Inferno I want to go back and revisit in the comics. But this issue, there was so much exhibition being thrown at us and repetitive information. And you can tell, like, Louise Simonson kind of wrote herself into like this little weird like pigeonhole here because she's here like Sinister has to tell Madelyne that she's a clone of Jean Grey, and then Madelyne needs to tell Jean Grey in this what if scenario that she is a clone of her. So this is information we already know going into it. Unfortunately, given the circumstances and the nature of the story, we have to sort of go through it. I would have kicked off the story right where Madelyne incinerated Cyclops. That's where I would have picked up the story. Like I said with the previous issue, this is supposed to be Jean meditating on what she did wrong, how Krakoa fell, because she is feeling a lot of guilt with what happened at the Hellfire Gala. So with the last issue, I would have said that perhaps Jean, in her guilt-ridden mind, thought that maybe she was focusing too much on her relationships with Cyclops and Wolverine. And this would have been a perfect venue to analyze why these three work together with a throuple that editorial is implying with us that they're in. why wouldn't Jean look at that relationship? And maybe she was distracted being on this island, for once being happy. She's back to life. She's finally living on an island where she can just sigh and have fun. She doesn't have to worry about dying. So maybe she loosened up a little bit. Maybe she wasn't as vigilant as she thought she did. Again, I'm not saying she wasn't in story. I'm not saying she wasn't in story, but I'm just saying that perhaps this is where her mind would go if she's feeling guilt about what happened on Krakoa. Similarly, with Madelyne, now that the issues with Madelyne have been resolved, maybe Jean can meditate on that relationship. Maybe she's thinking, I should have pushed the council to really have resurrected her earlier. So, because two Jean Greys on the island is better than one, and I could have trained Madelyne, and we could have protected Krakoa. And, by the time Nimrod would have come, we both could have taken down Nimrod and Moira and everything. But no, there is no examination here of her relationship with Madelyne. And, one of the things that I just have always said is that Madelyne, Jean, and Cyclops have been stalked and perverted by Mr. Sinister. Okay, I know when we talk about Scott and Madelyne, for example, Scott is the one who walked out on Madelyne when she had the baby to go be reunited with Jean. Right. And then Jean and Madelyne fight. And we have so many people out there who are like, oh, Madelyne's better than Jean, and to what I would say to that is that Mr. Sinister has stalked Scott Summers since he was an orphan, as a kid in an orphanage by himself, losing his parents, losing his brother, took genetic samples from Jean Grey without Jean Grey's consent, cloned Madelyne, gave her a fabricated history, and sent her to be that 1 in a million chance that they could fall in love. And then they have a kid, and then wants to get rid of Madelyne. So Sinister here is the bane of all three of their existence, right? It is unfair what he did, what Mr. Sinister did to Madelyne. It is unfair what Mr. Sinister did to Jean Grey. It's unfair what he did to Cyclops. This man is an awful human being. So I would have liked Jean to have at least had some clarity in everything that had gone here. Instead, it's just regurgitating the plot we have gotten for the last 40 years at X Factor, that we know that Cyclops thought Madelyne was dead. He had left Madelyne to go be with Jean, and then he thought Madelyne was dead, and then they find the baby and Inferno happens and Madelyne's angry. Yeah. We have gotten the story over and over again. We have gotten it over and over again in a what if format as well. Very interesting what if formats in the past, but it's time to move on. What was the point of this issue? This issue, I wouldn't even say is setting anything up, right? We can start talking about the links it has and what it's putting together at the end, but the actual content of the story, the actual content of this what if, does nothing to service the plot. And I was thinking, what is the entire point here? Because this isn't even actual continuity. I mean, what is the message that they're trying to say here? Because there's not even actual continuity. At least in the previous issue, there was this through line of the Phoenix. We do have the Phoenix here, who, when it comes to Jean, Jean's like, you bring rebirth, but you also bring death, and I don't want that. And the Phoenix is like, okay, bye. Good luck not dying without me. Is this the present time Phoenix talking to Jean? And that's something that we can really start examining. I think is probably one of the more appetizing things of the series. And we only know of it because Louis Simonson spoke about it on the X-Men Monday. Is the Phoenix a cosmic force that came to Jean, or did Jean create the Phoenix? And therefore, anytime the Phoenix is manifesting around the Marvel Universe, it's actually Jean's will being manifested. I love that question. I think the question is posed here. And I will also say that with Madelyne, it is really interesting that at the beginning of the issue, we do have a Madelyne that's talking to Jean that seems to be aware that Jean is revisiting key moments of her life. That Madelyne was very antagonistic. I don't know why she would be antagonistic, especially given Dark X-Men, that, Madelyne says that she felt Jean's death, given that in Dark Web, they seem to have resolved their issues. The last time we saw Jean and Madelyne together, it was like a backstory in Dark X-Men 1, where Jean and Madelyne and Scott were having dinner in limbo, or they were waiting for Madelyne, and they were with Havoc, something like that. So for all intents and purposes, they're all on good terms. And I don't know why this apparition, this part of Jean's soul that's Madelyne, whatever, would be so angry at Jean in this moment. If someone can explain it to me in the comments, I'm sure there is some kind of reasoning for it there. But let's talk about that ending, shall we? Where Madelyne floods New York City and Jean says no and is like, enough. And she comes out of that scenario and she goes, I accepted the Phoenix power. I sent the power to others. I rejected the Phoenix power. Every choice meant death and destruction. What else should I have done? And then she hears off screen, why, you ask? You're the one who created this mess, aren't you? And we have all these iterations of Jean around her. We have Teen Jean, we have Dark Phoenix, we have 60s Marvel Girl Jean, we have Jim Lee Jean, we have Here Comes Tomorrow Jean. Looks like we have Green Phoenix, and we have Age of Apocalypse Jean. I can't really tell who the other hand is right there. Here, I'll put it right there if you can see it. I don't know whose hand, which version of Jean's is that, but if you guys know Familia, let me know in the comments below. But I don't know. So I guess she's in the white hot room waiting for herself to arrive. These are all her different iterations because we know the white hot room is a nexus of all reality. The beginning of the issue does in fact tie into what's happening in Immortal X-Men, and Jean hears Hope's voice. She's curious why she's in chains. So they are stringing that along in Immortal X-Men, and we know the mutants there are in the white hot room. We can presume Jean is in the white hot room here as well. This doesn't really make any sense to me because the white hot room is physical, is a plane of existence, but I guess within the white hot room there are multiple planes of existence. So even though the mutants are their body and soul in the white hot room, Jean is there with a body and is trapped in her own mind that is also the white hot room. It doesn't make any sense to me. This is where I'm starting to get a little peeved because I'm trying to track everything here, but Jean does not seem to react when hearing the white hot room, and Jean would know what the white hot room is. I know there was a couple of comments in the Immortal X-Men recap that I did where I said, Hope as a White Phoenix would know some kind of implication about the white hot room, especially since she was in it during Generation Hope issue 3. And people were like, well, Hope was a White Phoenix, but she wasn't a White Phoenix of the Crown. To which I would say, I don't think there's enough continuity out there to dispute there's a difference between Hope's White Phoenix and a White Phoenix of the Crown. Yes, Jean is White Phoenix of the Crown, 100%. That's how I want her. But I would dare say that she probably would know what the white hot room is, as we saw with Cyclops in AVX, where he kind of ascended into the white hot room, or at least touched something and had an inkling that the wall above him was white. We could have assumed that Hope had that sort of transcendental experience. So where is this all going? I don't know. If I had it my way, I would love it that Jean becomes White Phoenix and transports all the mutants outside of the white hot room in the desert they find themselves in and takes them back to Earth. But at this point, man, whatever, I just want the series to be over with. I was complaining that we were getting 4 issues of Magneto's resurrection, and I can't believe that we got 4 issues of this. The last 2 issues have been extremely inconsequential, and a lot of people were reading into the first issue and Jean's guilt and sort of an examination of herself, and I agree, it's all there. But the last issue, it was a straight up what if. This is a straight up what if. And what I was really upset about in the first issue kind of translates here, which is it's sort of bookend by, the plot points. And then everything else in the middle is sort of just gibberish. It's just what if gibberish because the Watcher is still dead following original sin. So Jean has to act like her own what if. I don't know why we have a what if though scenario here. I don't know why anyone thought this would have been a good idea. And again, if you were going to use a what if to examine what was happening in the present day Jean Grey life, then I would be all for it. Again, with issue 1, you had an opportunity of her being like, well, if I had not locked away my memory as Teen Jean, I could have been better prepared to defend Krakoa. Fine. That is a very valid argument given that Team Jean went through so much. Second one, she could have been like, well, I focused too much on Scott and Wolverine. I should have been a better leader at Krakoa. Great. That the thruple has been at the center of a lot of Krakoan questions. And in this one, I should have been there for Madelyne. Two Jeans on Krakoa is better than one. We could have been a powerhouse, because that's what we see here in this. Notice that Madelyne is able to control all those molecules. That is Phoenix level power, which we saw in Here Comes Tomorrow. I've said this. Louise Simonson clearly loved Here Comes Tomorrow. You see the influence of Here Comes Tomorrow in everything she's writing. Even Madelyne hovering over Jean really reminded me of Sublime as Beast hovering over the Here Comes Tomorrow Phoenix. So trust me, I think there's a lot of homage to Here Comes Tomorrow in the series, and I love that because Here Comes Tomorrow is one of my favorite X-Men stories, Jean Grey stories. I love Here Comes Tomorrow quite a bit. But she's like, I can control the molecules here. So Madelyne is capable of great power. And we know Teen Jean, without the Phoenix, could perform really great, bigger feats than the Phoenix could have ever, given her. So, we saw it with her rearranging a lot of like molecules, and we've seen her turn into that pink, burst of energy. We're seeing that power display with Madelyne. So I would imagine Jean would have been like, man, I shouldn't have dropped the ball with Madelyne. We really should have had Madelyne at the forefront, because we share the same DNA. We're still a powerhouse. So Familia, those are my thoughts on Jean Grey issue 3. There isn't really much to say otherwise. It's just a straight up what if issue. That's it. We're tying into Immortal X-Men for a couple pages, and then we're setting up whatever this finale is going to be, where I guess Jean Grey's in the White Hot Room waiting for herself to arrive. So Familia, how did you feel about Jean Grey issue 3? Drop your feels below, DM me. Let's have a very good, conducive conversation about everything.